Welcome to this episode of AU Manufacturing Conversations, held in the lead up to our Spotlight on Scaling Up seminar on June 25th at UTS Ultimo. This morning event features a keynote from Alpha Nadia Taylor of TNA Solutions, plus a long list of other incredible speakers and panelists. It's sponsored by BDO, the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, and the Australian Business Growth Fund. Tickets are only $44 and more info is available in the episode description. Now on with the show. Paul, it's lovely to have you on AU Manufacturing Conversations. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Brent.
So, first of all, for those who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your work, please.
I'm a partner of BDO here in Sydney. For those of you not familiar with BDO, we're a leading global advisory and consulting organisation, offices dotted around Australia. I work within the deals advisory team and specialise in mergers and acquisitions. Again, for those who aren't aware exactly what mergers and acquisition professionals do, my primary focus is assisting business owners in growing their businesses through raising capital or assisting owners with a liquidity event, which can be either selling all or part of the business. The transactions that we play in are with owner-managed businesses, profit businesses, with sort of value ranges between sort of 20 and 300 million.
Right. So we're here to talk about scaling up in line with the Spotlight on Scaling Up seminar that BDO has been kind enough to be a part of. Tell me about this issue from where you're standing. Why is this interesting, important, worth considering? Your thoughts?
Good question. There's a couple of different ways I can tackle it, or we can tackle it. One is really looking at it from more of a macro perspective with a wider Australian lens, but also, there's another way in terms of a more micro perspective at the actual company level. If I take a step back and think about scale, manufacturing scale at a macro level, you start coming up with sort of topics around economic diversification and resilience. Australia has been historically reliant around mining and agriculture and services. And this also allows an increased scale of manufacturing, also can help with supply chain disruption, which we encountered during COVID. You have issues around national sovereignty and supply chain security. Innovation is a biggie. You think about Australia, and there's a lot of really, really smart people and a really highly skilled workforce, which, again, historically has been a bit underutilized when looking at advanced manufacturing. We would have more control around sustainable manufacturing and sort of what we do with the environment. And last but not least, the job multiplier effect, which when you make or create a manufacturing job, you create 4 or 5 other jobs or more in other sort of relevant industries. So there's a real macro impact that can happen. But I think I'm assuming the listeners are also keen to understand so what's going to happen directly within, how to scale impact their business at a company level. And some things to think about with the, obviously increased revenue and profitability, getting out to new markets, the ability to increase focus on innovation and R&D. The more IP you have in the business, the stronger your competitive position in the market and attracting talent. We as BDO, that's one of the big things, we pride ourselves on is creating a place that attracts the talent within the market. And again, I think the final point, and hopefully it's a nice little segue into what we're going to be chatting about, is really scaling does give you an improved appeal to the investing market and also will help improve valuation.
Yes, you mentioned scaling in terms of seeking investment, and the two are often hand in glove. Another thing that's an important part of that piece is communicating value to potential investors. Tell me about understanding value and communicating it.
I mean, a lot of times companies that we engage with, they're either looking to have a step change in the business and growing and accessing capital, whether that's equity capital or debt capital, but don't really understand if a company is looking to sell some equity, how do you get the best valuation for that equity? And the way to do that is to be a very attractive business to whomever is investing in your business or shares or the business of the owner selling shares in that business. And there's a couple of things to think about sort of at a high level. One is making sure that your investment objectives are clear. Like, why do you need the money? Is it for expansion, R&D, new equipment, entering a new market, having additional working capital? How much do you need? There's this concept called use of funds. So it's really hard to go to the market and say, I need $20 million, and then say, I know what I'm going to do 5 with it, and I'll tell you later what I'm going to do with 15. This doesn't work that way. So being really clear around what you need the money for. And then, as I sort of started out here in the beginning, just in terms of the type of investment, capital can come in many different shapes and forms. The purest form sort of being equity, shares in the business. And then at the other end is debt. And then there's a number of hybrid instruments you can have in between the two, and both have their own pros and cons. So really getting an understanding of the type of investment you're after. When an investor comes in, they will look very closely when they're looking at potentially investing. They'll look very closely at your financial information, whether that be audited financial statements, or sometimes almost as or more important is forecast financial information, financial models. Because if you think about that, what is a bank concerned with? A bank concerned with you being able to pay the interest and principal back, right? They always stress test future cash flows around being able to pay that. An equity investment wants returns on their investment, right? They don't have any security for money to put in the business, but they definitely want to see real growth in future cash flows in order to be able to realize a decent return for the investment and risk that they're taking. Also having documentation around some operational procedures, such as production capacity, utilization, supply chain, inventory management systems, and what the QA processes are. There's a whole set of documents, and one of the things we do at BDO is whenever someone is looking to entertain an investment process or a sale process, is we have a list of 50 questions around each of the different areas that investors will look at, and just do a bit of a stress test around how well a company is prepared around each of those questions. The next topic would be articulating a clear value proposition. So we work quite a bit with private equity funds, and one of the first things that any private equity investor will ask a company when they're having a chat with them is what makes your company unique? What's the competitive advantage, and how scalable is your business? And there's normally a common theme around all of those points, and it is around sort of that intellectual property and that company know-how that allows it to be unique and have a better competitive position in the short to medium term, which essentially the firm's going to come in and invest, and they're going to want to see growth within the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And if you're able to tick off those value propositions, it's going to get an investor much more comfortable to invest at a higher value. Other areas to think about is the corporate governance. If there's good corporate governance within a business, one, the process is going to go much more smoothly, but it's also going to give any investor a level of comfort that essentially what you tell them is happening going forward will actually be happening because you have the right systems and processes to deliver up the information. When you're actually going out to market, it's really good to have investor materials, right? So call it a nice pack of information with a red ribbon bow around it. And what that normally includes is whether it be an information memorandum, which is essentially a document telling investors what's the business, what's the growth story in the business, what have you done historically, what are you looking to do in the future, and why should I pay you a high multiple for what you've got? And then behind that sits a data room. So whenever you go into an investor process, you have your information memorandum, which the market sees, but behind that, if there is a process that's getting moved into a due diligence phase, you have a data room sitting in the background with all of the information and the company information to support everything that they marketing document. And it's really important that you have that ready to go so you can have a smooth diligence process prior to anybody coming in and investing. Brent, the last point around this is when looking at investment, or what sort of looking at it from an investor's lens, looking into the company, or you can look at the company and looking out for the investors. If I'm the company and I want to be valued at a higher multiple to my peers, in addition to everything I've just said around your equity story, the financials, the corporate governance, it's finding the right investor. So there are going to be a number of different pools of investors out there. Some will be more strategically aligned to the business and the business owners than others. So if you are going to go out and find investment, a real important part of this is to not just to go for one, it's to look at a number, because what I have found is certain, call it private equity funds or certain strategic investors, will have very focused objectives and have certain beliefs of what is going to happen in the manufacturing sector in the short to medium term, and therefore will be able to stretch their pricing a little bit more because of those beliefs.
So that's almost all we have time for. I think a good thing to close on would be about where we started, which is the event, Spotlight on Scaling Up on June 25 with BDO, one of the very important and wonderful sponsors that we have on board for that. You'll be presenting, Paul. I was wondering if you might be able to give listeners a sense of what you'll be saying on the day.
Yeah, thanks again. And I and BDO are really looking forward to being involved with this event. I've had a look at the presenters and the panels, and it looks like some really great conversations and very poignant conversations are going to be had on the day. And I've covered a number of topics in the chat. And as you've mentioned, I have the pleasure of being able to present on the day. I think whilst I talked about scale and sort of highlighted what investors look for, the focus of my presentation will be really doing a little bit more of a deep dive around what makes a manufacturing company valuable, sort of using an investor's lens. And when we say valuable, it's really about how does an investor get comfort with the future cash flows and the certainty around those, but also a multiple, a valuation multiple. So we'll look at the different aspects and what are the levers around pushing that up or down. Another thing I'll cover is what kind of investments out there. So I talked about sort of equity and debt. That's just a little bit of insight around what the options are. And then finally, I'll talk a bit around how do companies best prepare for an investment process.
Wonderful. Well, we look forward to the presentation. We look forward to the day itself. As for now, it's been very nice speaking to you, Paul. Thanks for taking the time, and we'll speak again soon.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you at the end of the month.